everyone. Hi.
I hate Tej already.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining part 2 of our Art of Letting Go, part 2.
Yay.
This is going to be awesome.
I'm excited for next time.
Definitely. We talked a lot last week about what forgiveness was, and today we're going to touch on a little bit about what forgiveness isn't. Hey, Herbal Bush House. And we're going to definitely we're going to explain, hey, Malika, um, explain what the differences are and what letting go really looks like without being jaded, without also being, victim blaming or victim shaming. There is a difference. So before we get into that, we noticed last week and the week before that, we never really introduced ourselves. So so Amina, you can go first while I quiet this little person down.
No problem. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Abisola Amina, and I am from the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and I am a mental health advocate there. And I have joined and collaborated with Judith and Rob Collage in order to share our experiences, whether it's from a mental perspective, spiritual, or holistic perspective. We are just here to share and have open discourse with everyone, and just share about forgiveness and share about the topics that are hard for us to talk about and discuss openly to forum where we can do this. So again, welcome and meet us here every Wednesday for this reading discourse.
Definitely. And for those of you who do know me or who don't, I'm Judith, the owner of Collage, a wellness shop. I do a lot of wellness services. I provide crystals, jewelry, information, the whole gambit. I'm very personable, and teaming up with Amina was something that we were starting right when I was pregnant, before I had my little one, and we waited until he was here so that we can definitely share our knowledge and our information. I am a life coach, so I know a lot of the mental aspects of some of the subjects we're going to be attacking these next couple of weeks. We have a lot of tools for you guys that you can utilize, and or we can tell you tools that you can use at home. He's not having it. I'm sorry. So, yeah. So let's just dive right on in.
Sure. So I'm excited about tonight's live because, as you said, last week we went into 7 steps that we can use in order to finish the process of forgiveness. And as you don't start it, you can't do the entire process. So we went into it in detail and it was amazing. And I was thinking, and I'm like, for part 2, since we've discussed what forgiveness is, why not let's discuss what forgiveness is not? For us to take away the misconceptions of forgiveness, because there are a lot of reasons why we do not want to forgive. And I think some of those misconceptions add to the reasons why we are not willing or ready to forgive easily. So one of the biggest ones, Judith, that we all use, that we have said, as you well know, I could let you say it. Forgive and forget. That's the big misconception.
There's no such thing as forgetting.
No. I think the person who came is some kind of offender, a repeat offender. And it's like, you know what? If we try to let people forget the things that we do wrong to them, maybe we can get away with it. But I think everything that we go through, even the things that are hard to forgive, are into our lives as lessons. I now believe that this is my perspective on life. Everything comes into your life as a lesson, and when you see it from that perspective, it for me it has become easier for me to let go of things and people and wrongs that have been done to me, because you now see things as not forgetting what happened, because you cannot forget a lesson because it came to help you change, to help you grow. So yes, you can get to the point of forgiving that person or forgiving that thing, but it doesn't mean that you will ever forget it, because by forgetting it means that you're forgetting the lesson. And if you forget the lesson, you're prone to repeat the same thing over and over again.
I am so happy that you said that last part, because when you forget, you're also suppressing, and you're actually awakening a part of trauma that
Mm.
might prevent you from feeling better.
Wow.
So we shouldn't forget, because that's what makes you stronger mentally. It also makes you stronger emotionally as well, because the lesson was for you to learn whether or not you can do XYZ again. And the forgiveness part is definitely for you.
Yes.
It's not for them.
I think this is a point we have to really emphasize all night, because we tend to forget that forgiveness is for you healing, is for you to move past a difficult time in your life or something that has really traumatized you. So a lot of times when we refuse to forgive, thinking that we are hurting, we are seeking revenge on the other person by not forgiving them, or by holding on to the grudge or holding on to the pain, you are only damaging yourself. Because one thing I have from experience while I'm holding the grudge and dying inside, this sometimes the people have moved on and they've gone ahead with their lives and you're still stuck. So you don't do it for others. Always come back to yourself and figure out why did it happen. Even if you don't understand the why and the closure thing, that's another thing we'll talk about later on. Still find a way to forgive and to let go of that person for yourself.
Definitely. And we have a full moon that's upon us in a couple days, and the the forgiveness
I'm
piece.
ready.
Sorry?
I'm ready for it.
Me too. Me too. This moon is going to be very, yeah, it's going to be a full moon in Virgo. Um, and it's good to work on forgiveness at least once a month. Um, I like to do during my full moon circles to basically work on a couple questions that are tough to answer, but they get you to basically open up your mind to possibilities of what you're able to withstand or handle and what you can't, and answering them with total honesty, right? And definitely forgiving yourself as part of the task, and forgiving others and doing it for you, not for them, so that you can see, the following month in a new light, not holding on to whatever you faced or whatever you're going through for that month, transferring all over to the following month. And doing it 12 times a year or once a month, you'll definitely notice how you grow as a person. And if you have the same thing that you're trying to forgive for the entire 12 times in one year, just know that you weren't ready to forgive or go through those steps. And like I said last week, it took me 4 years to get over something. So give yourself time,
Yeah,
and patience. Definitely some patience.
absolutely. I just see a lot of people are coming in. We have Roshi, Rochelle, we have a whole bunch of people coming in. Romeo X Music, welcome. Miss Talk and NFRBA. It's also from St. Lucia. I'm seeing a lot of people from St. Lucia here. So I just
Oh,
wanted to give people.
Diane. Cool. Diane is here. Missy's here. Hey, loves. And if you
Yeah.
ladies or gentlemen have any questions, please chime in during this conversation. Um, Yeah, I definitely love doing the forgiveness piece once a month. And I also like inviting like the once you've forgiven, now you've opened yourself up to opportunities. You know,
Absolutely.
you can't I like to show with a hand, you can't receive when your hands are closed.
Exactly.
So if you're unwilling to forgive or unwilling to let go of whatever's, holding you back, you're literally walking around with your hands like this. And some people say, well, why is it hard to manifest or why is it hard to, get certain things to um work for you or whatever? Well, in essence, you need to work on forgiveness. You need to work on, seeing stuff in a new light. If you're constantly looking at it from a negative standpoint, there's no way you're going to invite anything positive into your world. And it starts with the mind. Like we create and destroy with our minds as well as with our tongues.
No, absolutely. And I love when you spoke about the rituals that you do when it comes to forgiveness. I do the same, and that's one of the reasons why I was able to get the healing. And a huge part of it was to face yourself. A big part of facing yourself is forgiving others and forgiving yourself. So I love the idea of reinforcing that if you do a ritual or something on a monthly basis. And I choose to do it like you with the full moon because it's a time of release, it's a time of closure, it's a time of letting go. And I use that energy to help me let go of things. And it has helped me and has transformed my life. I cannot even say how much it has done for me doing those regular rituals. So for those people who are now coming into the conversation, we just want to give you a recap. We are discussing last week we discussed what forgiveness is, and this week we are discussing what forgiveness is not. So far we are now discussing the forgive and forget aspect of it. We have fully spoken about it, so I think we should go on to the next one, if you
Def-
don't mind. And the second one that we want to discuss is forgiveness does not mean condoning or excusing a wrong. And it does not minimize or justify the wrong either. So you can actually forgive the person without excusing the act or the pain the person have inflicted on you. And that's important for us to talk about.
Definitely. Before we get into that, Divine by Design mentioned that showing yourself the love and compassion you would to others, forgiveness for yourself is so important. I agree with that because sometimes when we're down and out or depressed or anxious, we tend to treat people outside of ourselves better than we do for ourselves. And we tend to retaliate or lash out on the people we love most versus being nicer to strangers. Um, some people might act differently, but definitely showing compassion to yourself first can help you better understand what forgiveness looks like.
No, absolutely. And I love that when you're saying is like a lot of this because one of the main reasons why we don't like to forgive or it's hard to forgive, we do have the perception that if we forgive the wrong, we are, and especially if we ask that person for forgiveness or we solicit forgiveness from that person, somehow it is telling that person as what they've done is okay. And that's not what it is at all. Again, we go back to the fundamental aspect of forgiveness is for yourself, is for your healing. So regardless of what the person does or does not do, it doesn't matter. You have to let down your ego because that's a big reason why we can't forgive others or allow the process of letting go happen in a free and natural way. It's because our egos cannot allow that person to get away with it because we have that perception. If I forgive them, they get away with it, but not at all. Karma, universal ways of justification. Justice always takes care of it.
There's
You may not see it, it may not happen when the way you expect it to happen. You may not see the way that it will manifest your justice. However, it does not even matter how all of that happens. Just do it for yourself. Think about the pain that you are inflicting upon yourself. Because while you don't forgive the other person for what they've done to you, by holding on to it, you are continuing the abuse upon your own self. by not forgiving that person because you are thinking about it, you are continuing to develop a rage and the grudge and reliving that negative situation over and over again, and you continue to inflict. So no longer is the person reliable or responsible for that anymore because you are continuing the process upon yourself and you are continuing the abuse. So that is why it is important to let go of people, let go of things that are no longer serving you and find the pattern for yourself in order for you to love yourself enough in order for you to let go, even of the people that have hurt you the most. And that's the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. You don't even understand. As Judith said, doors will start opening for you once you're able to let go of the grudge or the pain and don't refuse to carry the stuff. Give it back to people. No, give it back to them. I've been doing that. I'm like, I refuse to continue to allow things. I give it back to you. Hold that. I'm no longer
Return to
carrying.
sender.
I have taken responsibility and accountability for my part of whatever has happened. I am not holding on to your part anymore. I give it back to you. You're responsible for your part. And that's how I have radically chosen to go about my forgiveness journey. Just refusing to not forgive people.
Definitely. And it's like the power struggle too, because our ego feels like we lose power when we forgive people, and that's the
Absolutely.
contrary. You gain self-worth, self-esteem, because if you're willing to seek the higher road, then you're definitely able to see things in a new light,
No,
and
absolutely.
you're willing to possibly show them that what they've done is wrong, and they can't probably do that to you again, and if they try, you know they might not succeed.
Yeah, and that's where the boundaries come in. Because again, after you've done the forgiveness part, again, it doesn't mean that you become best buddies. And that's exactly what DJ Rich 85, 86, sorry, just said. I tell people you don't even have to associate with the person after you forgive. And that is absolutely right. And this segues into the next point I was about to talk about. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Reconciliation may follow forgiveness if you conclusion and that's what both want. It shouldn't be an expectation once you forgive and release that situation. I think that's one of the misconceptions that we have about forgiving.
Definitely. It doesn't mean that the person will continue being in your life. um
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that now this might be tricky, right? Because people have family members, and um there's sometimes family that they can't find themselves
Yes.
mentally forgiving for whatever situation might have happened, right? So when it comes to the reconciliation part, you have to somewhat see, some type of reconciliation, because they might be close family members, or someone you cannot live without, or whatever. Um, and we talked about not living in the cutoff season, because everyone wants to cut everybody off, right? But if it
Yeah.
is a family member, the reconciliation would be your boundary of not seeing that person constantly or all the time. And if
Yeah.
it's impossible because there might be a living situation, or some type of relationship that has to, be a constant in your life, then you need to understand that um, your patience is key and necessary.
Yeah, because we spoke about the cutting the cutting of art. But I believe, let me play devil's advocate. I believe that there are times when it is so necessary when we get to the point of cutting off. Because a lot of times I think that's why we stay stuck and that's why we keep certain energies in our lives because of history. because of family, because of relations, because of experience, or a whole bunch of other reasons why we hold on to toxic things and toxic people because we have those things attached to those situations. And I think it's necessary sometimes to completely sever ties with people or situations, especially when you realize that there's not going to be a change if you continue in the same way that you've been going. And I know it's really hard for some people to do that. And it was hard for me at first. But again, when you think about how is it affecting me, back to you and see, okay, how is that affecting me? How can I do something about it? And when you cut people off, it doesn't mean that you have to hate the person that you cut off or you have to wish them negative things to happen to them. Cutting off doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing either. Just means that sometimes, as you say, when you sever those ties, you don't have these energies around you, so you start a peace of mind that you never had before. You start realizing the vibration around you starts to change. You start realizing you start manifesting better and new situations that make your life easier. And that's what you want in the process, you know?
Definitely. And you know what's funny? Today we were supposed to, our topic for this week was supposed to be healing from childhood trauma. And
Ah,
sometimes forgiving what happened to you in your childhood could definitely open up doors for your adulthood.
yes. This is absolutely right. And I, again, speaking from experience, that was a huge part of the healing process. I started healing the root chakra, took me back to childhood trauma and to unearth and face it. This was so difficult, but went through the process. It was long, hard of self-reflection. Eventually, you get through, you know. So it is important for us to go back to the childhood stuff and to unearth that, to forgive it in order to open our hearts and open doors that we know was closed as we've held on, kept to, certain things from our past. So I see
Definitely.
quite a bit of interaction. So I'll go through some of them because people are really interacting today. Nova Trient Journeys. Sorry, I mangled that up. Give it back. I love that. Actually, it's easier to conceptualize and grace apply graciously declining BS. Okay, setting, okay, it is divine by design with love. Setting healthy boundaries around toxic family is important. I definitely agree with that. And loved ones too, and close friends too. And someone said, okay, again, divine by design with love. Toxic family are not going to be able to understand you. They are limited to their own perception and experience. That is so factual. All of us, not only on our families, all of us, we all see things from our own perspective, even when we give advice. That's why I'm very cautious now when I give advice to people or I take advice from people, because I realize people give you advice or counsel or put their perception only based on what they can see or they themselves can conceptualize.
That, but also the some people when they're listening to you, sometimes they listen to respond versus
Mhm.
listening to understand. And with forgiveness and with listening to, because sometimes people vent or talk to other people about situations that they might need advice on, and we have to understand when we're venting because we need to allow space for venting, and then we also need to allow space for receiving, right? And with the receiving part, you have to really fully understand what the person just told you, or is that person really listening to you or understanding the situation that you're going through? So that that's a very tricky part too.
Yeah.
Because when family members or friends or whatever aren't seeing things from your point of view because you've been through things that they don't understand, um, you kind of have to articulate it in a way that they can conceptualize it without judgment as well. Um, and also don't expect them to be in your shoes or understand what it feels like to be in your shoes because some traumatic experiences people experience are some things that you don't want to wish on anyone else, right? So being able to not only open yourself up to the vulnerability aspect of forgiveness because it does put you in a space where you're like, oh no, I don't know if I can ever allow myself to go through that again. But
Mhm.
opening your mind to maybe others won't understand what you've been through.
Yes. But I could from a personal experience coming from a mental health perspective. When I first became sick with depression, and my family did not understand because I was far removed from my personality or what they deemed as my normal personality, you know. In the very tough for my family to understand my perspective and from where I was coming from. And it took a learning curve and it took a lot of trial and error of pain. But eventually understanding it. But during the time of trying to explain my perspective, went through a lot of painful experiences. And I got to a point where I felt neglected, forgotten, and even left from people that were very close to me. I lost a lot of friends and a lot of my foundation, I thought. People that were some of my foundation people fell along the way when I was sick, and that was very traumatic for me. Imagine going through already a mental breakdown and having your foundation people falling away, and you get to a point where you completely lost and you have to find your way, and you feel a sense of pain and anger, especially when you know you've been there and now it's your turn and it's like everybody has disappeared. And I got to a point where I was filled with a lot of rage and a lot of anger about it, you know. And it took me a while for me to start seeing things from perspective because only seeing things from my perspective. They left me. I felt up, and already I have abandonment issues. And I had those childhood issues that I had to deal with. So imagine being feeling abandoned in a time of crisis. That was like over the top for me. However, over time, over learning to heal myself and loving myself and seeing things, it was very difficult to see things from their perspective as to why they couldn't understand what I was going through. It's only when I realized how difficult it was even to understand what I was going through myself. Also, I'm like, if I can't even understand some of what I am going through, how can they understand it? Because it's so mysterious, some of the changes I went through. So, from perspective, I learned again, give people grace and cut people some slack. And it was difficult at first, but the more I did that, the more I practiced cutting people slack, giving people grace, and giving people space to even falter sometimes. It just started giving me even more love and appreciation for myself. And because of that, I was able to start forgiving a little bit easier now.
Yeah, it gets easier to forgive people, especially um, sometimes it's not easy to forgive when you can see it coming, but or when you don't see it coming too. It depends on the person. Because sometimes we give people too many chances, right? And we
Yeah.
feel like, okay, maybe this person deserves another opportunity or another chance to do something, but it's like, oh no, I should have never. So, in that case, you should definitely work on forgiving yourself because you
Yeah.
were vulnerable enough to see outside of the situation. So it all just depends.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to shout out because I see quite a few people coming in. Marie is here. We have Donnell, Glenn Shalry, and Rochelle from St. Lucia who's joined us. Welcome, guys. And please join in the discussion and let us know your views on what forgiveness is not.
All right, we have a question under construction. What about when trying to get past something traumatic, but even thinking about what happened gives you anxiety or panic attack? Oh, I got you on that.
Yeah.
Um, so the situation that took me 4 years to forgive was definitely a family related issue. And I thought I was in the wrong. Um, and believe you me, maybe I was, but the way it played out was completely out of my hands. And what they did kind of upset me to the point where I didn't want to associate myself with them or even care about, inviting them to certain things or going to their things or whatever. And I was on the cutoff season, right? I was like, let me take you out of my mind and out of my world. Let me move far away. I did, and do whatever, right? So, um, with doing that, I kind of put myself in a hole or in like a dark space, and I didn't really see like, okay, maybe if I opened up or spoke about it, or really healed from it instead of trying to internalize it too much, and think of different scenarios of what could happen, what would have happened if I did this, why did I do that, why didn't I do this, and I had a lot of anxiety over all of that, and it did definitely hurt and it caused some pain. However, what took me to the 4 year mark, or when I didn't want it to go past 4 years, right, was
Mm.
the fact that I accepted that it is what it is, right? It happened. Um, I wasn't going to be around certain people that would treat me that way again. you know um I definitely learned a huge lesson. I forgave them for the way they reacted. I forgave myself for not knowing at the time not to do what I did, or not to overly share or overly give, because I'm that type of person. I like to give, but some people aren't willing to receive. And it taught me to be more mindful of other people where they're at, right? Because we meet people where they're at, and the anxiety for me was, oh well, I love to help people. Well, not everyone needs to be helped, um, and not everybody wants the help. And being able, like I said earlier, to listen to people, because sometimes people are just open to venting, not necessarily hearing what your advice is, and you have to be able to discern what's the between the two. And not everyone can. You might have a girlfriend or a guy friend that just wants to talk, and sometimes they do want to hear you to speaking about what it is, or advising them on what they should do, and some people don't. So that's the lesson that I had to learn 4 years ago, or for the 4 year period when I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I love to tell people what to do or help them, whatever, but it doesn't work for everyone. So my anxiety was there, but it stopped since. I hope that answered your question, construction, under construction. When you feel like the panic attack, definitely know that you're not in that situation. Understand where you are now and how you can heal from it. Um, nothing is anybody's, nothing is ever anybody's fault. Think of it like that too, because when we went through the 7 steps of forgiveness, um, you have to look at it from a beginner's mind, and you definitely need to see that whatever you could have done, it wouldn't have changed the outlook.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I think you've answered that thoroughly.
I hope so.
Yes, okay, so we can, as again, welcome guys. I see new people are coming in. Miss Lewis, Yvonne. Hi, Yvonne. Welcome. Lydia is in the house also. Alexis Naturals, welcome. We are now talking about what forgiveness is not since last week. And if you missed last week's episode, you could check on our social media and you could see a repeat of last week's episode, which was part one, where we discussed 7 steps to help you forgive. Today we are talking about what forgiveness is not, and we're going to continue. Forgiveness is not conditional. You can't say I will forgive you only if you do certain things.
Oh my goodness, I love that. You know how love is unconditional? Treat forgiveness the same way. They
That's
go
hard.
hand in hand. Sorry?
That is hard. This unconditional forgiveness, like looking at unconditional love. I know it could be very difficult, but that's the only way you can get through it, to be honest.
But some people put too many conditions on things and they limit themselves, you know, and that's kind of hard. How can you have so many conditions? It's like walking around with contracts for everything. And think of it like that, right? Who wants to walk around with a contract? Okay, I need this for this, I need this for that, I need No, it doesn't work like that. You'll put yourself in a bind. You're walking around like this. You're
Yeah.
you're walking around like this. Yes, Diane, release expectation. I like to tell people you die with so much expectation because nothing will ever meet all your needs, right?
No.
And when you compare too, we die with comparison. When you compare so many things and you put the expectation on things, you're not going to end up happy. Your results will not be what you assume.
No, absolutely. The conditional aspect of forgiving with conditions, again, it just shows your ego. Because how can you want somebody to forgive you, to forgive somebody, and you tell them it's almost a form of manipulation, as far as I'm concerned. It's not genuine forgiveness if you have a condition for me to forgive you. So again, you have to release all of those kinds of negativity and go into forgiveness with your whole heart, even if it's difficult at first, you know?
Mm-hmm. There are a couple questions.
Yeah.
Nova True Journeys. I hope I pronounced that right. Discernment, that's a superpower. Can it be learned or taught? Discernment is definitely an intuition. It's
Mhm.
also being open-minded and listening because one thing we don't do as humans, because someone wrote that we are humans in here somewhere, one things we don't do is definitely properly listen to what people are saying because there's sometimes an underlying text with the words and when it comes to forgiveness, are you forgiving the act? Are you forgiving the words? Are you forgiving how you felt? Or you were
Wow.
treated, you know? So there's so many parts. And that's why last week when I mentioned writing the situation on top and then seeing if you can go through the 7 steps is definitely something you have to go through because each step has its own powerful uh its own powerful trying to figure out the word I want to use. That's not
Step,
too
condition,
powerful trigger, you know, it'll definitely trigger you to move or trigger you to stop.
okay. I agree. I
So
just wanted to, oh, go ahead, sorry.
so when it comes to like learning the superpower of discernment, I feel like it's learned definitely through what your experiences are. It's learned through you being open-minded and listening to um what you have to offer, what the other person had to offer, how the situation went down, and going from there.
Yeah. Add to that, if she's referring to learning how to listen to her intuition, a big part for me that helped me to do that is by practicing mindfulness, and I preach that all the time. And that simply means just staying in the present moment, even when you are interacting with people, especially those people that you need to forgive. You have to become more of an observer. You have to be more of be more in an observant perspective rather than always be participating in everything. And I had to learn that. Sometimes we are so busy wanting to bring our points across that, as you say, we miss out so many cues. We miss out so much. People are saying about their own words, with their body language, with the tone of their voice, a whole bunch of things I had to learn. I had to become my own detective, you know, because that's true. Because you see, when you get to the point where you're tired of going through the cycle, the vicious cycle, and you just wear. I almost lost my life because I continue to allow myself to continuously go through certain cycles that it was time for me to stop. And I was destroying myself. And when I got to that realization, I'm like, listen, do what you have to do to pull yourself out of it. And if it means building boundaries, if it means doing whatever you have to do so. But listen without listen to modern words. That's what I was trying to say. Listen to modern words. Become an observer. Stop always having to have something to say. Listen to what people are telling you without having to. Go ahead, Judy.
Listen to understand, don't listen to respond.
Absolutely. And Mrs. Lewis Yvonne says forgiveness is letting go, accepting the situation has happened, and approaching it with a positive character, but building boundaries. Wow, this is well said. You covered everything.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Wow, we have quite a, and expectations equal conditions. Oh, here's somebody, Rochelle. Hi, Rochelle is saying the toughest thing about forgiving someone, I think, is the human thought that you are letting someone off the hook, who most times haven't even acknowledged
I,
that they've hurt you. Oh my word, yes,
I
girl.
I saw that and I wanted to definitely go into that. That's the ego. Thinking that
Yeah,
you're letting them off the hook. That's your ego
yeah,
thinking that.
yeah.
They're not off the hook. By no means they're not off the hook. Um, especially when you develop the boundary, right? So let's say you have a friend that's constantly coming over and rummaging through your fridge and they never offer to pay for any groceries or whatever. And they constantly do it. This is just an example, right? One day you finally put a lock on the fridge. They come over and they try to get something out the fridge, and they're like, "What's the combination?" You're like, I can't give it to you." Why not? Well, you never put anything in the fridge. You always rummaging through my fridge, and you don't respect me. So you either bring food or you don't, or you don't come here to go through my fridge. Chances are they're either gonna bring some food to put into your fridge and you can remove the lock, or you're gonna keep the lock and they just won't come.
Absolutely.
So that's an example that I could give you. Um, Also, speaking up for yourself. If you feel like they're off the hook, that's mainly because you probably didn't speak up for yourself or tell them what it is that they've done. Um, if you are afforded the opportunity to speak to the person, because a lot of times some of our traumas or some of the things we need to forgive, we have no opportunity to speak to the person. By no means do you need to assume that they're off the hook. Somewhat karma might get them in some other form or some other way. I'm a true believer of karma. Karma is my
Me
best friend,
I
and it
believe
should be yours
because
too.
I've been on both sides.
Of
I
karma.
believe I've been on both sides of the karma end, so I believe in karma wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and if you believe in karma and you believe in being the right person or the good person, um, no one's off the hook, and you probably don't know what their karma might look like, you know.
Exactly.
Hurt people.
Yes.
And the biggest thing for this whole conversation of forgiveness, you don't want to be that hurt person hurting other people. Because when you
Yes.
bleed, you're bleeding on other people. And those people
Yes.
who are getting bled on are not necessarily looking to get bled on.
They don't
So,
even sometimes they're innocent bystanders in your misery and in your toxic thing. You hurt other people innocently. And speaking of that, I was thinking about the other side of it. It's one thing when you are the one who has to forgive the person. I have been in a position where someone refused to forgive me. And it was one of the most heart-wrenching experiences of my life. When you finally do not realize how much you've hurt that person or your wrongdoing, but when you finally come to that realization, realize how much you've hurt that person because of your own personal experience you've been through, and you're now willing to make amends or you're willing to do the right thing because you've come to that realization, and that person will just not have it. And it took me a long time because I felt so guilty, and I started like really beating up myself about it and everything, and you feel guilty. Oh, and the guilt was real. And it took me a while of learning to forgive myself and saying, you know what? I have to wash my hands off of it because I tried. I literally tried several times to reach out, and the person, and it was difficult at first, especially when you feel as if getting that forgiveness from that person somehow is going to justify you or make you feel better about what you've done, or at least for them to make you feel better because they've forgiven you. And you still have to find that love for yourself and be able to say, you know what, even if I never get the opportunity to say sorry to that person, I did the best that I can. And with that, I have to release the situation. I cannot continue to burden myself with the guilt and you choose whether you open the door, leave the door open for an opportunity for that person when the person chooses to return. Again, when you're the one who is the offender, you cannot determine how long the person should get over it. And that's another thing. People like to dictate to you to get over things when they wronged you. Don't tell me to get over it. I will get over it on my terms. And I think when you're the offender, you should be at least humble enough to say, you know what? And that's what I did. I'm like, I was the offender. So that's what I give that person all the space and I leave the door open. So if the person ever wants to talk about it, I will be completely open for it. Even if the person comes to me and says, I never want to talk to you again, at least I know I gave it my all and I could let it go and move on from it.
Definitely. And the other thing about sometimes, well, you see, you practice mindfulness and you understood that, okay, I was an offender, so I'm giving that person time and space, right? But other offenders or repeat offenders don't see that, right? Um, and they don't afford the other parties that opportunity to just, come back and whenever they're ready, or, and people who like to be dismissive or telling people how they should feel or whatever, that they need a lot of healing too. Again, remember the bleeding person, that person's bleeding on everybody. So it it's kind of hard to teach that person or the narcissist, right? Because there's narcissists and there's so many different types of people out there that and I don't want to go through all of them, but there's a few but that those type of people, they don't see that they're doing wrong. And no one's
Judy,
really jumped up to correct them or put them in their place or set the boundary to make them feel like, okay, you cannot do that anymore. And it all stems from childhood,
yeah,
So healing the child, which we were supposed to talk about today, but we'll talk about it next week. But healing the child, the child within you definitely helps you become a better adult.
yes.
We're adult children, some of us. And we still act like we're in high school or school or whatever if we don't get our way. And sometimes not getting your way is a part of forgiveness too.
Yeah. But Judith, even that aspect of it goes even deeper, and there's scientific research to back that up that certain traumatic experiences that you experience in your formative years, especially between 0 and 13, can actually retard your developmental progress or growth. And that's why you find a lot of grown people that are emotionally immature or have retarded growth emotionally because of those reasons. And we carry all of those things, unknown things, subliminal things, because it happened to me. There were a lot of trauma that I experienced growing up, and it developed into different personality traits and character flaws and behavioral flaws that I did not know how to control. And you have to hide it because it's not acceptable, some of the things that you think, some of the ways that you feel inside, and you don't have control over how to correct it. And you're young, remember, you're young, all of this stuff is happening and you don't have the right counsel. Nobody is telling you what is happening to you. So here you carry baggage and baggage of negativity, toxic trauma, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it is emotional abuse, physical abuse. We carry a lot of stuff from our childhood and we undermine the power, even in utero, that can have an impact on children. And there is this study, epigenetics, that actually goes into that says that, epigenetics says that trauma can actually modify your genes to the point where you become predisposed to certain illnesses like mental illness, like diabetes, like heartbreak, like heart problems, and we don't even
Heartbreak.
realize that have heartbreak. All of that actually, we carry all of those stuff with us, even from in utero. And we don't know that we carry this into adulthood. And we want to have all of these rich, beautiful relationships that, again, are predicated upon all kinds of falsities and mixed ideas of what love is or what a real relationship is. So we have to put all of this in context and go back to what it is that I need to forgive myself, what it is that I need to move on from trauma, despite the fact that it happened in childhood and it was not my fault. I still have to find a way to forgive it and move on from it for myself.
Definitely. And next week, we're going to definitely talk about healing your childhood trauma and forgiving your parents.
Oh, yes.
Because what you just mentioned, you touched on, some of us don't forgive our parents in a way that we act like them in some ways, right? There's one of I have a favorite commercial, an insurance commercial where they're like, "Don't be like your parents," and this person was pronouncing quinoa, like so many things. So basically, don't be like your parents. We sometimes turn out to be the things that we hate, and if you
Yeah.
have a hatred or a disdain towards, your elders or your family or your parents, that comes around and bites you constantly. And it we're going to really dive deep into that next week because that's going to be something that can help a lot of people,
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even relationships with friends, or other adults, because when you don't learn a lesson, it keeps coming back. It keeps making you relive that situation or an experience so that you can move on and grow from it. So
Absolutely.
I'm
But
excited.
me too. I'm very versed and excited about this topic because that's my entire life. And if I'm writing books, this is what I'm going to be writing about, really. Just to touch on the reason why it's hard for sometimes for us to forgive our parents. We also forget that we have generational trauma and curses and generational things that we carry. So your parents sometimes reflect exactly the trauma that their parents experience, and the cycle continues until you get to the point where you have to decide, I will be the one to stop the vicious generational cycle and break the curse. And that's what I chose to do. And I'm happy I did it before I became a mother, because I knew, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, even if I really wanted to be a mom, but a big part of me felt, because I was struggling so much within myself. I was struggling. I was a struggling human being, and it showed. Even if I try to mask it, I try to bury it, I try to have different personas. You cannot hide. Sometimes the trauma comes out in different ways, especially when you try to suppress it. So I had to learn, that what my parents did and what this person did, because it was very hard for me to forgive a certain parent, and I blame that person for a lot of the stuff that happened to me. And it took me a long time for me to be able to let go of it and understand. When I look back, you have to do research too. Don't just you have to go dig deep, go and ask about your grandfather, ask about your father's father, find out where all of this came from. If your father is acting a certain way towards you, or go back and find out what his trauma was. There is a reason why. Sometimes even when you talk to your cousins and you do your research, you realize your cousins are battling the same things that you're battling. Your sister, your uncle, and then you realize, but it's a family affair. The trauma is a family thing, and you have to decide as an individual and stop making excuses and saying, this is how I am because of my family, this and my family. Stop making excuses to hold on to your trauma. If you're serious about liberating your soul, stop making excuses.
You're
Julie, this
right.
is us. The reason why I'm passionate, because I went through the process and I know how I feel now. I was a struggling human being, a struggling female, a black woman struggling for so long. And I finally found what worked for me. And a big part of it, whether you like it or not, is forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness.
And I want to touch on that because I know for a fact that before I became a mom, I had to work on healing myself and forgiving a lot of things. Um, and I definitely want to share like my birth story, where I was and where I am now, like mentally, spiritually, physically. You're so right. Like this whole forgiveness piece, it definitely is for you as a person, because you'll notice like you'll be able to do certain things that you weren't able to do before.
Yes.
I wasn't able to become a mom until I forgave certain things in my life. And then I became a mom, you know? So, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And looking at what my parents did or whatever, they weren't there physically, but they were there like, you know, the ways that they had to be. And I used to think, okay, I needed to forgive them for not being there when they had to be, but I know I'm going to be a different parent or a different mom, completely different, and I'm healing my generational, you know,
Right.
my generational trauma, and not putting that onto my son, or you know, or putting that onto whatever, if I have children, more children, or the people who I do meet, and teaching them how to, you know, forgive their parents or forgive their traumas, so they don't bleed onto other people, or teach other people not to do the same thing too. So like I'm so happy that you mentioned that part, because
Yeah.
if I didn't forgive certain things, I would have never been where I am right now. And I
No,
said this
absolutely.
last week too. There's so
Yeah.
many things I'm so grateful for. Um, oh, before we go, we had to also understand that when you are forgiving, you become grateful.
Yes.
And that's one thing forgiveness is all about: gratitude, being humble, being available to, you know, experience new, amazing, abundant things
Yes.
into your life. And
I'm
I'm
telling
so fortunate to have achieved so many things, you know, with mistakes, of course, but we're all humans. We're all stumbling. We're all growing. We're all, you know, living and surviving, and doing what we have to do or can do and afforded to do.
Yes. Oh, wow. The time has flown by. It's almost time to say good night.
And but hopefully it doesn't cut us off. But this is like a great conversation, you know. And do you have any other stuff to mention what healing is not? I mean, forgiveness is not?
Yes, I could just maybe just browse through them since we have to go soon. The other
Sure.
one was forgiveness is not justice, which we just spoke about. You don't have to get an apology. And somebody made a point there, like DJ Rich said, I just had this conversation with a friend the other day. You can also forgive without the other person knowing it, if that makes sense. And that completely makes sense. You don't always have to get an apology or whatever. Forgiveness is not about changing the other person's actions or their behavior.
You can't change people, and we spoke about this last week too. You can't expect things from people, but you could change how you react. You know,
Yes,
you can't um you can't allow people to make you their puppet.
no,
If you
that's where the
react
boundaries come in.
Exactly, if you react to everything that's put onto you, or targeted towards you, then you're allowing society to control you.
Absolutely.
And that mindfulness piece is definitely key, so that you can work on you and be
Yeah.
stronger you.
Yes. And if we have one more, this is a big one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Forgiveness doesn't mean trust. Forgiveness should be given freely, but trust should be done cautiously. Because once somebody has broken your trust, not because you've forgiven them to think that we could become bosom buddies and then start from scratch. There's no starting from scratch. You learn the lesson, you set healthy boundaries, and now you have new parameters for how you move on with this person based on the trust issues that you had in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But the trust part, when it comes to forgiveness, is trusting in yourself,
Yes.
not trusting
And
in
listening
them.
to your intuition. Again, going back to listening to your own intuition.
If there's red flags, if there's hairs growing on the back of your neck, like, you can't do this. listen to it, because your body is your best friend.
Yeah. Another thing too is when somebody might be saying something to you, but the energy, you feel it energetically that what they're saying and what you're feeling energetically is not matching. Do not think it's you that is going crazy. You have to get to the point where you have to know when it is you who is telling your inner self is telling you, pay attention, listen, be an observer, as somebody say, actively observe people when you are interacting with them by being mindful, being in the present, pay attention, and don't think that, everything is that you're seeing at face value is really what is reality. That is not actually what's going on. So you have to be more discerning when it comes to that.
Definitely. I respect that. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you. We are so humbled to be giving you all of this information and answering any questions that you might have. Please join us again next Wednesday for our next live. We are doing a pre-recording of our lives on our podcast, Awakened Guidance Podcast. Um, you can definitely find that on, I'm going to at the page right now,
I'm
Awaken.
also going to make an official announcement for my people for them to know how to find the podcast. But I'm excited, Judith. Thank you for the opportunity
I,
to start the podcast with you for season 2, guys.
yes,
For the first
Stephen.
was already, so I'm going to share the link.
Definitely. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And you can recatch this live on my IGTV. I'm going to be posting it right now. We love you. We appreciate you. Any questions, feel free to message us. I answer my DMs all the time. Amina, it's always a great time with you. And we do not rehearse these conversations, by the way. We just have them right on live. So,
And that's what I love about it. It's exciting that way. We just come and we just, we fired up.
yep, definitely. So, see you guys again next week. Have a great
Bye,
night.
guys. Thank you for coming. Mwah.
Mwah.